The rain hit the pavement like gunfire, each drop exploding into silver spray that hissed and steamed against the city streets. My chest heaved with every ragged breath, the November cold slicing through my lungs like broken glass. Behind me, I could hear him. Leonard's voice cutting through the storm, raw and venomous, hurling accusations that made my skin crawl. "Karina, you can't run from me forever." My leather boots pounded against the slick concrete, barely gripping as I careened around a corner into a neighborhood I'd never been before. The world had collapsed to a single desperate search. Just the next streetlight, the next corner, the next door that might be unlocked. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I could feel it in my throat, in my fingertips, in every terrified stride. I'd been careless. So stupidly careless. When Leonard had appeared outside my building tonight, I'd frozen for just a second too long. Long enough to see the twisted fury in his face, the predatory way he'd started toward me, the promises of what he'd do when he caught me written in every tense line of his body. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about punishment. He'd grabbed for me the moment I'd tried to slip past him. And I'd bolted, just bolted, without thinking, my phone tumbling from my pocket to shatter against the steps, without any strategy beyond creating space between his hands and my body. "Stop running." Leonard's voice was gaining, and I dared to look back. He was closing the distance, maybe half a block now, his frame cutting through the rain-drenched darkness, his jacket open and flapping. The streetlights caught the wild intensity on his face, and fear coiled tight in my stomach. I knew that expression. I'd seen it the night he'd shoved me against the kitchen counter, the night I'd finally walked out and sworn I'd never let him touch me again. My eyes swept the street in desperation. Nearly everything was shuttered at this hour, dark windows reflecting nothing but my own panic. But ahead, maybe 60 feet away, golden lights spilled across the wet sidewalk. An establishment, its discreet brass nameplate impossible to read through the downpour. I didn't care what it was. A restaurant, a gallery, a private office. It was lit, and that was everything. I forced my legs faster, ignoring the fire spreading through my thighs and the sharp pain blooming in my ribs. The distance melted. 50 feet, 40, 30. Details emerged now. Expensive frosted glass doors with ornate handles, tall windows revealing warm amber light and the suggestion of leather furniture in tasteful arrangements. Some kind of exclusive club, probably the sort of place where people like me didn't belong. "Karina, I swear to God." I hit the door with my full weight, my wet palms sliding once on the brass before catching hold. The door opened with surprising silence, and I practically tumbled inside, catching myself against a marble-topped console table. Something glass rattled dangerously, but I barely registered it as I whirled to slam the door shut behind me. The sudden quiet was disorienting. Outside, Leonard had skidded to a stop, maybe 15 feet from the entrance, his shoulders rising and falling. Even through the rain-streaked glass, I could see the calculation flickering in his expression. Would he follow me in here? Would he risk witnesses? For several suspended heartbeats, we stared at each other through the barrier. Predator and prey separated by a single door and the fragile safety of a public space. Then I registered the absolute stillness behind me. The particular quality of silence that happens when every conversation has stopped and every person in a room has turned their attention to one thing. To me. I turned slowly, my spine still pressed against the door, and truly looked at my surroundings for the first time. The space was intimate and dimly lit, all dark wood paneling and rich burgundy leather. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, barely audible now beneath the weight of the silence. A bar lined one wall, backlit bottles casting amber reflections. Several round tables occupied the center of the room, and at the largest one, directly in my line of sight, sat 6 men in expensive suits. They weren't looking at menus or drinks. They were looking at me. And every single one of them radiated the kind of danger that made Leonard's rage seem like a tantrum. But it was the man at the head of the table who made my breath stop entirely. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, a neck tattoo barely visible above his crisp white collar, and eyes, dark, assessing, absolutely unreadable, that pinned me in place with an intensity that felt physical. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply watched me with the patient stillness of someone who knew exactly how much power he held in this room, in this moment, in this city. One of the other men started to rise, his hand moving toward his jacket in a gesture I recognized from 100 crime movies. But the man at the head of the table raised one finger. Just one. And everyone froze. Outside, Leonard pounded once on the glass. "Karina. Get out here. Now." I flinched, but I couldn't look away from the man whose gaze held mine like a vice. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an expression that might have been curiosity or calculation or something far more dangerous. Then, with movements that were unhurried and deliberate, he set down his glass, pushed back his chair, and stood. He was taller than I'd expected. Broader. The kind of presence that seemed to fill the entire room. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't quite place, smooth as expensive whiskey and twice as intoxicating. "We have a guest." His eyes never left mine. "And it appears," he continued, moving around the table with the fluid grace of something predatory, "that someone has made the mistake of chasing her to my door." He stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, could see the absolutely lethal promise in his expression. "Tell me, Kara," he murmured, his voice dropping to something intimate despite the audience. "Do you know where you are?" I shook my head mutely, my voice lost somewhere beneath the pounding of my heart. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Il Sanctuario." He glanced past me to where Leonard was still visible through the glass, rain streaming down around him. "Sanctuary." Then he looked back at me, and something shifted in his expression. Something possessive and absolute and terrifying in its certainty. "And you just claimed it." I stumbled further into the room, my wet boots squeaking against polished hardwood, leaving a trail of water behind me like evidence of my intrusion. The warmth hit me all at once, making my soaked clothes feel even heavier against my skin, making me aware of how I must look, dripping, desperate, wild-eyed. The 6 men at the table didn't move, but I felt their attention like a physical weight. They wore their suits like armor, each one tailored to perfection, each one concealing what I instinctively knew were weapons. This wasn't a business meeting. Or rather, it was, just not the legal kind. My gaze skittered across their faces, trying to assess the threat, trying to understand what I'd just walked into. Hard expressions. Cold eyes. The kind of men who made decisions that didn't involve paperwork or lawyers. Then my eyes found him. The man at the head of the table sat with the stillness of someone who'd never had to demand attention because it was simply given. His suit was black, perfectly cut across shoulders that suggested violence held in check. Dark hair swept back from a face of sharp angles and harder lines. But it was the tattoo creeping up from his collar, intricate, deliberate, unapologetic, that made my breath catch. This wasn't some trust fund businessman playing at danger. His eyes met mine, and the room seemed to tilt. They were nearly black in the low light, depthless and calculating, taking in every detail of my appearance with an intensity that made me feel stripped bare. Not with lust, that would have been easier to understand. This was assessment. Cataloging. The look of a predator deciding whether I was threat, prey, or something else entirely. Leonard pounded on the door again, his muffled shouts penetrating the thick silence. "Karina. I know you can hear me." The man's gaze flickered past me to the door, just for a second, then returned. Something changed in his expression, a slight tightening around his mouth, a dangerous glint that made my stomach drop. Then he moved. He stood with fluid grace, unfolding from his chair like smoke rising. The other men shifted slightly, a ripple of deference that told me everything I needed to know about who held power here. He was taller than Leonard, I realized. Broader through the shoulders. And the air around him seemed to thicken with barely restrained violence. "Cara mia," he said softly, his accented voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "You look terrified." His eyes never left mine as he added, "Tell me who I need to kill." The words hung in the air between us, both promise and threat, and I couldn't find my voice to answer. My mouth opened, but nothing came out except a shaky breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. Leonard's fist hammered against the glass again, harder this time. "Don't ignore me, Karina. Get out here right now, or I swear." One of the men at the table rose smoothly, his hands sliding inside his jacket with practiced ease. I saw the bulge there, unmistakable, and my heart seized in my chest. This was escalating too fast, spinning into something I couldn't control. But the man in front of me, the one whose eyes had barely left my face, raised a single hand. Palm out. Fingers relaxed. The armed man froze mid-step. "No, Marco." His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried absolute authority. "I'll handle this personally." He buttoned his suit jacket with deliberate precision, each movement controlled, then walked past me toward the door. I pressed myself against the console table to let him pass, and caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, gun oil, maybe, or leather. He unlocked the door and stepped outside into the rain without hesitation, without even pausing to turn up his collar. The downpour hit him immediately, darkening his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice. I moved to the window, my hands gripping the frame, watching through the streaked glass as he approached Leonard. The other men in the room shifted behind me, their attention focused on the scene unfolding outside. Leonard straightened when he saw someone emerge, his chest puffing up with false bravado. "Finally. Tell your customer to." The man moved into Leonard's space with 2 unhurried steps, and my ex's words died mid-sentence. Even from inside, I could see the exact moment Leonard registered what he was facing. His expression changed from anger to uncertainty to something approaching fear. The man spoke. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I watched Leonard's face drain of color. The man gestured once, a casual, almost elegant motion, and Leonard took a stumbling step backward. The man kept talking. His posture remained relaxed, almost bored, but Leonard was now visibly shaking. Rain streamed down both their faces, but only one of them looked like he was drowning. Then the man leaned in, said something final, and stepped back. Leonard turned and ran. Actually ran, stumbling over his own feet in his desperation to get away, disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. The man stood outside for another moment, watching the direction Leonard had fled, rain streaming off his shoulders like a dark waterfall. Then he turned and walked back toward the entrance with the same unhurried grace, as if he'd simply stepped out for air rather than delivered threats that had sent a grown man running in terror. He pushed through the door, and water dripped from his hair onto the hardwood. His white shirt clung to his chest, nearly transparent now, revealing the dark lines of more tattoos beneath. He looked like some avenging angel cast down from heaven, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. His eyes found mine immediately, and I felt that same visceral impact as before, like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. "He won't be back," he said simply, his accent wrapping around the words like velvet over steel. He reached up to brush water from his face, the gesture oddly intimate in the charged silence. "You're safe now." I should have felt relief. Gratitude. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness expanding in my chest, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving nothing but exhaustion and the terrifying realization that I had nowhere to go. "Thank you," I managed, my voice hoarse. I should leave. Let you get back to your meeting. No. The word was soft but absolute. He moved closer, stopping just inside my personal space, and I could feel the cold radiating from his wet clothes. You came to me for sanctuary, Kara. In my world, that means something. I didn't come to you, I said, trying to summon some backbone, some remnant of the independence I'd fought so hard to build. I ran into the first open door. And yet you're here. His head tilted slightly, studying me with those impossibly dark eyes. In IL's sanctuario. Under my roof. That makes you mine to protect. I can take care of myself. He didn't argue. Didn't smile. He simply asked, where will you go? I opened my mouth, but no answer came. Does he know where you live? My silence was damning. Your work? Your friends? Each question landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Do you truly believe you're safe? I looked away, my throat tight, because we both knew the answer. Leonard had found me before. He'd find me again. And next time, there might not be a lit door to run through. You'll stay with me, the man said, and it wasn't a question. I didn't remember agreeing. Didn't remember nodding or saying yes or making any conscious decision at all. But somehow I found myself being guided through a back exit by a firm hand on my lower back, his touch burning through my wet leather jacket like a brand. The alley behind IL's sanctuario was dark and narrow, rain still falling in steady sheets. A black SUV idled there, windows tinted so dark they looked like pools of ink. Two men stood beside it, both in dark suits, both radiating the same coiled readiness as the men inside the club. This is Karina, the man said, opening the rear door. She's under my protection now. Spread the word. Both men nodded, their expressions unreadable, and I realized this was more than a simple instruction. It was a declaration. A claim being made public within whatever organization these men belonged to. He handed me into the vehicle with surprising gentleness, then slid in beside me. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like finality, and the SUV pulled smoothly into traffic. The interior smelled of leather and gun oil. A partition separated us from the driver, offering the illusion of privacy. I sat rigidly, hyper-aware of his presence beside me, of the way his wet shirt still clung to his frame, of how the darkness outside made the windows into mirrors that reflected my pale, exhausted face. You never told me your name, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Damien Diego. He said it like I should recognize it, and maybe I should have. And you're Karina Valdez. How did you? Your ex was very vocal. Something dark flickered across his expression. Screaming your name repeatedly tends to share information. The city lights gradually gave way to darkness as we drove, the buildings growing sparse and then disappearing entirely. We were heading out of the city, into territory I didn't know. Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Somewhere safe. He turned to look at me fully, and in the dim light from the dashboard, his features were all shadows and sharp edges. My business interests require discretion, Kara. Absolute loyalty. And when something belongs to me, I protect it with everything I have. The way he said, belongs to me, made my breath catch. Threats are eliminated permanently, he continued, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. Always. The estate appeared through the rain like something from another world, high stone walls, iron gates that opened silently at our approach, and beyond them, a sprawling mansion that glowed with warm light against the darkness. We drove up a circular driveway lined with manicured hedges, and I realized with growing unease just how far I was from everything familiar. Damien led me through massive wooden doors into a foyer that took my breath away. Marble floors, a chandelier that sparkled like captured starlight, and a sweeping staircase that curved upward into shadow. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, old and established and absolute. A woman appeared from a side hallway, older, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled into a neat bun. She took one look at me, soaked, shivering, probably wild-eyed, and her expression softened immediately. "Rosa," Damien said, his hands still resting on my lower back. "This is Karina. She'll be staying with us. See that she has everything she needs." Rosa nodded, but her gaze flickered between us with obvious curiosity. "Of course, Jeef." She turned to me with a warm smile. "Come, Mija. Let's get you dry and warm." As Rosa guided me toward the stairs, I heard her murmur, almost to herself, "El Jeef doesn't bring people here. You must be very special." The words settled over me like a weight. The guest suite was larger than my entire apartment, a bedroom with a four-poster bed draped in silk, a sitting area with plush furniture, and a bathroom of gleaming marble and gold fixtures. Rosa showed me where everything was, her movements efficient but gentle, and when she opened the closet, I found it stocked with women's clothes in exactly my size. "How?" I started, but Rosa just smiled. "El Jeef is very thorough, Mija. Now shower, rest. You're safe here." When she left, closing the door softly behind her, I finally let myself collapse. The terror I'd been holding at bay crashed over me in waves, Leonard's face, his threats, the desperate flight through rain-dark streets. My hands shook as I stripped off my wet clothes, and in the shower, I wasn't sure if the water streaming down my face was from the spray or from tears. But wrapped in a soft robe, sliding between sheets that felt like clouds, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and, for a disorienting moment, couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the rain, Leonard, Illinois Sanctuario, Damien Diego's dark eyes declaring me his to protect. I found clothes laid out on the chair, jeans that fit perfectly, a soft sweater in deep green, even undergarments in exactly my size. The thoroughness of it should have been creepy, but instead I felt a strange sort of care in the gesture, as if someone had anticipated my every need. Rosa found me wandering the hallways and guided me to a garden that seemed impossible in November, enclosed in glass, warm and lush, filled with plants I couldn't name. I stood by a fountain, listening to the water, trying to process everything that had happened in less than 12 hours. "You didn't sleep long." His voice came from behind me, and I turned to find Damien emerging from a side path. He looked different in daylight. Less like an avenging angel, more like a man, though no less dangerous for it. His white shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the full extent of the tattoos that covered his forearms. Intricate designs, religious imagery mixed with something older, darker. They moved when his muscles shifted, living art on living canvas. "I'm used to waking early for work," I said, then reality crashed in. "Oh God, work. I'm supposed to be there in an hour." And my apartment, I left everything unlocked, my door was probably already handled. He moved closer, his hands sliding into his pockets. "Your manager received a call this morning. Family emergency. You'll be out for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. You can't just. Your apartment has been secured. New locks installed. A cleaning service has addressed any damage. Your belongings are safe." He said it like he was reading a grocery list, casual and absolute. "Your phone has been replaced. Your bills will continue to be paid. Any other concerns?" I stared at him, caught between gratitude and outrage. "You can't just take over my life." "I'm not taking it over, Kara. I'm protecting it." He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. You'll stay here until I'm certain your ex understands that you're untouchable. That could be days. Could be weeks. And I don't get a say in this? His expression softened slightly, something almost like regret flickering across his features. You got a say the moment you ran through my door. The days blurred together in a strange rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons reading in the library, evenings that inevitably led to dinner with Damien in the formal dining room that somehow felt intimate despite its size. He was different away from his men, away from the cold authority he wore like armor at IL's Sanctuario. Still controlled, still watchful, but there were moments when I caught glimpses of something underneath. Dry humor in the curve of his mouth, genuine interest when he asked about my life, a surprising gentleness in the way he poured my wine. My grandfather built this estate, he told me one evening, swirling whiskey in his glass. He came from Sicily with nothing but the clothes on his back and a code he refused to break. Family above all. Loyalty unto death. Protection for those who seek it. I traced the rim of my wine glass, thinking of my own grandfather, of the small town in Colombia where everyone knew everyone, where debts were remembered and favors were sacred. My abuelo used to say something similar. La familia es todo. Family is everything. Damien's eyes sharpened with interest. You left them? Your family? To build my own life here. To be independent. The word tasted bitter now. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, without relying on anyone. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Look how well that worked out. You survived, he said quietly. You ran when you needed to. You found sanctuary. That takes strength, Kara, not weakness. Something in his tone cracked the careful control I'd been maintaining. Tears burned behind my eyes, and I looked away, embarrassed. I should have been smarter. Should have seen the signs with Leonard earlier, should have. No. His chair scraped back, and suddenly he was beside me, his hand covering mine on the table. The touch was warm, solid, anchoring. You carry no blame for what he did. None. I looked up at him through blurred vision and saw something raw in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. His thumb traced slow circles on the back of my hand, and the gesture was so tender it broke something inside me. In my world, he said softly, when something is placed in your care, you protect it with your life. It's not about control, Karina. It's about honor. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't possession. This was devotion. I was in the library when Rosa found me, her expression carefully neutral in a way that immediately set my nerves on edge. El Jeef needs to see you in his study, Mija. The walk down the hallway felt endless. I'd been at the estate for nearly 2 weeks, and in that time, I'd settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to belonging. But the tension radiating from Rosa reminded me that this peace was fragile, built on foundations I didn't fully understand. Damien stood behind his desk when I entered, his back to me, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the grounds beyond. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. Something had happened. Leonard hired someone to find you, he said without turning around. His voice was flat, emotionless, and somehow that made it more terrifying. A private investigator. Not a particularly intelligent one, but persistent. My stomach dropped. How did you? My network is extensive, Kara. Nothing happens in this city that I don't know about. He turned then, and his eyes were cold, distant, the warmth I'd grown accustomed to over dinners completely absent. It's been handled. Permanently. The word hung between us, weighted with implications I understood perfectly. I should have been horrified. Should have demanded details, should have recoiled from what he was telling me he'd done. Instead, I felt only a profound sense of relief. He won't look for you again, Damien continued, watching me carefully, as if waiting for judgment or fear or rejection. No one will. You're truly free now. Free. The word should have made me want to leave, to reclaim the independence I'd fought so hard for. But standing in his study, looking at this man who'd eliminated a threat without being asked, who'd protected me with a ruthlessness that should have terrified me, I realized something fundamental had shifted. I didn't want freedom from him. I wanted freedom with him. I crossed the room slowly, watching understanding dawn in his dark eyes. His breath caught when I reached up to touch his face, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "Karina," he started, but I silenced him with a kiss. His control shattered instantly. His arms came around me, crushing me against him, and he kissed me back with a desperate intensity that stole my breath. This wasn't gentle. This was claiming, possessing, two people choosing each other despite, or perhaps because of, the darkness between them. The dress was silk and lace, custom-made by a designer whose name I'd only seen in magazines, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I'd changed physically, but because the fear that had lived in my eyes for so long was finally, completely gone. Rosa fussed with my veil, her eyes bright with tears. "You look like a queen, Mija. El Jeef won't be able to breathe when he sees you." The ceremony was private, held in the estate's chapel with only Damien's closest family and associates present. I'd expected resistance, especially from the older men who ran in his circles, the ones who still believed in bloodlines and traditions. But they'd welcomed me with a respect I hadn't anticipated, seeing something in Damien's unwavering devotion that transcended their prejudices. His cousin Marco, who'd nearly drawn a gun that first night at IL's Sanctuario, walked me down the aisle with surprising gentleness. "He's different with you," he murmured as we approached the altar. "Lighter. Thank you for that." Then I saw Damien, and everything else fell away. He stood at the altar in a black suit that looked like sin personified, his dark eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. The tattoos on his neck were visible above his collar, a reminder of the dangerous world he inhabited, the darkness he carried. But in his expression, I saw only light, only love, fierce and absolute and unshakable. The priest's words washed over me in Italian and English, sacred vows that felt like destiny rather than choice. When Damien slid the ring onto my finger, his hands were steady, but I felt the tremor of emotion he kept carefully contained. "Mia Mowgli," he said softly, "just for me. My wife." Then he pulled me close and kissed me with a possessive intensity that made the small gathering fade into nothing. His hand cupped the back of my neck, holding me to him as if he'd never let go, and I kissed him back with everything I had, all the gratitude, the desire, the bone-deep certainty that this was exactly where I belonged. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my lips as he whispered words that sealed us together more surely than any legal document. "Mia per sempre, cara mia. Mine forever, my darling." I'd run into his world seeking escape and found something infinitely more precious, a love as dangerous and absolute as the man who'd claimed me with a kiss. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe so you don't miss the next Mafia love story. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what you thought of this narrator. Your feedback really helps me make these even better for you. Thank you for letting my stories keep you company.